Hello, everyone. Welcome to the night. I'm just going to bring up our director. Let some people take some time to get in here. Bear with me a moment. Alrighty. No one judge me for my Christmas decorations, please. All right, here we go. So let's welcome everyone to Filmocracy Fest and our Q&A for Through the Night. We're happy to have Lolita to join us today to share some of her insights on making the film. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to present your amazing film with our audience and for joining us today. Let us jump right in. Through the Night was directed by Lolita Limbo, and she also produced alongside Jamaica Autry. Lolita Limbo is an Afro-Dominican filmmaker and DJ interested in the creation of art that is nuanced and revelatory for communities of color. He's the Senior Vice President of Programs at Firelight Media. Firelight is committed to making films about pivotal movements and moments in the U.S. Firelight's flagship program. The Documentary Lab is a fellowship that provides mentorship, funding, and industry access to filmmakers of color. Firstly, welcome again. And can you tell us a little bit about when you had the idea to tell this story?
Sure. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure and an honor. Again, I'm Loida Limbal, the director and producer of Through the Night. And to answer the question of when I first had the idea to make this film, I read an article about the daycare featured in the film about 6 years ago now. And the article was really focused on the sort of exploring the fact that in the US, more and more people now have to work more than one job to make ends meet, and that many of those jobs require overnight hours or what is sort of seen as non-standard hours. And the article was posing the question of, given that that is the reality, who then takes care of people's children? And in the article, they profiled the daycare that is featured in the film. And when I read the article, it immediately made me think about my own childhood and my own mother, who raised us as a single working mother and working the night shift. My mother was a home health aide and took care of elderly people in their homes. And you know, this is work that in the US is very poorly compensated. It's a low wage. And she worked very long hours with very little sort of flexibility or, you know, and very little by way of a safety net. So when I read the article, it immediately sort of brought me back to my own childhood and captivated, you know, my imagination and sort of set me into this process of reflection. And as a filmmaker, then, you know, I immediately was like, this would be a great story to tell.
So speaking kind of on your personal experiences and how that impacted the film, is there anything in particular that influenced the story or anything like that made you kind of want to tell this story?
Yeah, I would say, you know, again, the sort of piece around my mother. I myself now am a mother, and I also work a full-time job. I'm also a single parent, and although my sort of life is very different today than my mother's was, I often wonder how she did it, you know, like how she was able to raise us given the odds that she was up against and the lack of sort of resources and support that she had. And I think it's a question that I have in general about many of the women in my community. I'm from the Bronx in New York, which is a predominantly Black and Latino borough, and it's made up of poor and working class, folks of color, many immigrants. And I just sort of know, what our day-to-day lives are like. And so I do wonder, about how women and single mothers just manage, to do what they do in the face of so much sort of systemic issues and oppression. And so there was a piece of it that was about wanting to at once explore that idea of, well, what was my mother's interior experience like? And then also just really feeling like this story is one that is reflective of so many people's story in the US, but it's very rarely represented, and it's a type of story that we don't see very often. And just feeling like my community deserves to see itself represented on screen with nuance and complexity and care. And so that's part of the motivation and desire to tell the story.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, speaking of the film, there's some heartbreaking and some light moments as well of the families throughout the documentary. Can you tell us if there was maybe a specific family or child that kind of left a lasting impact on you?
Yes, there were many, so it's a little bit hard to choose. I would say we spent a lot of time with Marisol and her daughters. And Marisol is the mother who is, working 3 jobs, who we see sort of go for the job interview and all of that. And so we spent a lot of time with her and her daughters, and Diana, her oldest daughter. We sort of saw her grow up because she was already a little bit older than some of the other kids. And over the time that we were in production, she was growing up, and we watched her become, Nunu's right hand almost. She was like kind of like Nunu's shadow, and always like right behind Nunu or right next to Nunu. And watching her, and her relationship with Nunu as she was growing up herself was very profound, and something that I feel very honored that we were able to not only capture, but just witness. Because I think in many ways, one of the things that I hope people take away from the film is that I feel like this community and this daycare does redefine family and what family can be and what it can look like, which is, again, something that I hope resonates for people. I think many times in the US, the nuclear family model is still upheld as the only respectable or, desirable model of family. But increasingly, our realities are so sort of very diverse, and people are living such diverse kinds of lives that I hope we can sort of shake that sort of hold that one model has on us, so that we can then recognize, acknowledge, and respect and support and celebrate different forms of family. And so that's, part of what I saw in the relationship between Nunu and Diana, that, it was very much, Diana saw Nunu as a grandmother, and for all intents and purposes, Nunu is Diana's grandmother, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely believe that message came across to the audiences as well. So did you have any challenges in making the film in terms of overcoming anything during the production?
Yes, of course. Many challenges.
Always one problem.
I didn't have any sort of major challenges with any of the film participants. I would say some of the major challenges that I had were related to sort of my own life circumstances, and particularly my own lack or scarcity of time, because I was making the film while working full time, while also parenting full time. And at times it really was, I had lots of doubts around like, am I striking the right balance here? Or am I at least, getting close to the right balance, and certainly at times feeling like, wondering, am I taking too much time away from my children to work on this project? Or conversely, am I not giving this project enough time, enough of myself to actually, make it as good as it can be? And so there was this sort of internal dialogue and fear around the scarcity of time that was running in the background, which at times I think did really impede my process and my progress. So it was a very sort of internal battle that I was fighting in some
Yeah.
ways. And I think that was the biggest one. There were other challenges, but I would say that that was the biggest one for me along the way.
Yeah, so speaking kind of as a filmmaker and going through those challenges, do you have any advice for other kind of aspiring directors and producers wanting to get into documentary?
Yes, yes. So I actually had a conversation with our director of photography, Naiti Gomez, who is a friend and someone that I deeply admire, just her work and her craft. And we were talking about precisely this thing of the fear and the insecurity, particularly in the beginning of a project when it's still very kind of fragile because it's taking shape and you're very unsure of, the validity of your ideas, and your vision is not super clear. It might still be hard to communicate your vision to collaborators, and there's sort of frustration and doubt that seeps in. And so it's this very fragile state. Um, and I remember speaking with Naiti, and one thing that she said to me was, that your creative muscles are like any other muscles. The more that you use them, the stronger that they get. And so, when you are facing something that is very scary, sort of just taking it like one step at a time, putting one foot in front of the other, and finding ways to keep moving through it. And that the more that you do that, subsequently, each time you have to do the next thing, it'll be a lighter lift because your muscles are stronger. It's almost like working out, right? Like when you first start working out, it's like horrible, you're in pain, you're dying. But once you get, into a rhythm, into a flow, it becomes this other, sometimes like very transformative experience or transcendental experience, right? But you have to stick at it, and you have to work through the fear, you have to work through the procrastination, the pain, the doubt, all the things, right? And so I share that because I found it to be very useful for me when I was facing something that felt like overwhelming. I sort of try to break it down into manageable parts, and then just think about, let's just take this one step at a time. Let me not worry about the thing that's going to potentially come 6 months down the line. Let me focus on the thing that's happening tomorrow. And just sort of, just breaking it down in that way.
Yeah, just kind of taking a step back, and practice makes perfect, really. So obviously, with everything going on in the world right now with COVID-19, in particular with these centers, is there anything we can do to kind of help, or any resources that we can reach out to donate?
Oh, yes, that's a great question. So we actually did launch a fundraiser. And the we is us and the film team and the film's protagonists. So a group of childcare providers, parents, and the film team. We launched a fundraiser earlier this year around Mother's Day, which was specifically to give unrestricted cash grants to daycare centers that have remained open. Many daycares have closed, but a select few have remained open across the US because they are the centers that are caring for the children of essential workers.
Mm-hmm.
And while they've remained open, they're facing a lot of different sort of challenges and difficulties. And for them, the centers already sort of all run on a very thin margin financially.
Yes.
And with COVID, a lot of their financial models have collapsed because parents, not to get too in the weeds, but a lot of these centers are kind of based on a mixed income, mixed, socioeconomic, sort of community. And you have some parents that pay their fees out of pocket, while other families might receive subsidies or might pay, discounted fees. Things function sometimes on a sliding scale based on income. Essentially, what has happened is that the families who are able to sort of work from home have taken their children out of daycare, which makes a lot of sense, right? Because everyone is
Mm-hmm.
being told to stay home. But then that means that income is gone, from these daycare centers. And so, anyway, all that to say, we launched this fund to give unrestricted cash grants to these centers so that they could weather the storms. And we raised, in the initial round, we raised $70,000 and gave grants
Wow.
to 13 centers in New York. And now we have reopened the fund. It's called the Essential Care Fund, and the information is on our website, which is just throughthenightfilm.com. We've reopened the fund so that we can give grants to daycare centers caring for the children of essential workers in the cities where the film will be opening theatrically. So the film will be in theaters in the U.S. In a few cities beginning December 11th, and we want to sort of, if we're going to LA or Chicago, we want to do the same thing. So that fund is open, and that's a place where people can donate. And there are other resources and information on our website as well for folks that want to support in some way.
Perfect. Yeah, amazing. Yeah, we'll definitely have to kind of share those links with our audience as well. And also, if anyone that's watching, if they go into our Impact Expo, we do have 2 resources as well that you can donate to help out working moms. Kind of switching back into what you're just talking about distribution, do you have any other plans for platforms that we can see Through the Night on, or anything, or is that still kind of being decided in terms of, you said that there'd be a theatrical release in the US, but
Yes.
do you have any plans for VOD?
Yes, so we're still working that out. We're hoping that will all sort of be settled soon. As of right now, we have the theatrical lined up, and then the film will be on POV on PBS in the US in May of 2021. So yeah, and VOD and international distribution, we're still hoping that something comes through. Still trying to figure it out. It's been a strange year to release a film and figure things out.
It is difficult. I guess, in terms of any other screenings, do you have any educational events or any other kind of call to action screenings that we can learn about as well?
Yes, we do, and everything is listed on the film's website. So we are in the process now of doing community screenings. We just did 2 this week, actually, and they are sort of under the banner of cities and towns caring for their caregivers. That's what we want to sort of. That's the major call to action, is for folks to see caregiving work as something that is valuable, important, right? That needs to be respected, but also that caregiving is, something that we're all responsible for, something that we all need, and something that we all deserve. And so the work should be lifted up and centered and supported accordingly. So that's a major call to action. And then on the website, we have different sort of events and links for donations and links to learn about different organizations that have campaigns going on related to these issues as well.
Okay, great. We're kind of nearing our end of our time here, so I'll throw it to the audience. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to throw a question in here while we're still talking. But is there anything else you kind of want to share with our audience today? Anything that you feel you haven't really got a chance to speak about? Maybe anything else that the cast or other production members couldn't be here today, or anything like that?
I think maybe just to sort of underscore the fact that, you know, this film was made obviously before COVID-19, and we could have never imagined, you know, what was to come this year, and yet, you know, it sort of ended up that everyone in the film is an essential worker. You know, Shanona, one of the mothers in the film, is a pediatric ER nurse. And so she's been on the front line of the pandemic, literally, for the last, you know, 8, 9 months. Marisol works for a supermarket supply store. So she's been working 6, 7 days a week this whole time as well.
Wow.
And then Nunu and Patrick they never closed their center. They've been open this whole time as well, taking care of Shanona's kids, Marisol's kids, and many other essential working families' children. You know, and in this moment where now we have this language of essential workers and we understand, you know, who does the labor that actually keeps a society, you know, functioning. I guess my highest hope is that we can already take that to heart, and then begin to act accordingly, because, you know, oftentimes, not everyone, but oftentimes this work is really undervalued. And, you know, as you see in the film, you know, the way that things are set up just don't make any sense. And that was before the pandemic, right? And so now, you know, with the pandemic, it's that much harder. We have new information, new analysis, a new understanding. And so I hope that our actions will follow suit as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a question here. So I'll just read it out. While filming on the subjects that are often serious or somber, how do you kind of keep that energy light and positive on set?
Well, with this project, I would say it was easy to have a balance because there is so much joy in the daycare center and so much love, you know, and the children themselves are just like, you know, and even Patrick is hilarious and was like constantly, you know, making dad, you know, dry dad jokes, which you kind of can't help but laugh at. You know, and Nuno is also herself a very positive and like charismatic, and, you know, she's like this person that radiates light. So, you know, while the film certainly touches on a lot of structural issues and injustice, the families and the protagonists themselves are light-filled, loving, amazing people. And so I think it was for us, we didn't have to work at striking a balance, you know, on this topic. And I would say, for me as a filmmaker, given where I am in my life, these are the kinds of stories that I want to tell. Where there is inherent joy and love in the story and in the space itself. For example, you know, I am not in a place where I would be able to go document something that's happening in a war zone. You know, or I'm not, you know, psychologically and emotionally in a place where I could really make a film about, you know, family separation at the US border, right? Those are obviously super important stories and topics to tell. But as a filmmaker, and as a person where I am in my life, again, I'm looking for stories that I feel are undertold or underreported, that have some inherent joy, because I think that we need a balance, particularly when you think of the stories that you see about Black and Brown communities. Oftentimes, and particularly in the documentary world, the stories about our lives are solely about struggle and solely about crisis.
Mm.
And again, there's a lot of struggle, there's a lot of crisis, but as human beings, nobody's life is all struggle or all crisis, right? And so I'm interested in the kind of creating a body of work that balances out, all that other, sort of existing canon. So that's a personal sort of inclination of mine.
Yeah, and I think that really definitely comes through in the documentary. Absolutely. We just got one final question left here. So what do you think was one of the most important things you learned while making this film, maybe about yourself?
Oh, that's such a thoughtful question. One of the things that's been really profound for me in this process of making this film is that as I was making it, I was very clear that I wanted to center the very communities that the film is about as the primary audience. I hope the film reaches a lot of people and all sorts of people, but I made it really thinking about Black and Latina, working class, single mothers and caregivers, and I wanted the film to feel like a love letter to them and sort of an offering, and an offering of tenderness. So I wanted the film to feel like the tenderness that I wish for these women in my community, because I feel like society treats us in very harsh ways sometimes. And so I wanted to sort of make this cinematic offering of tenderness, if you will. And one of the most profound things that came, revelations in that process for me was sort of understanding that, like, if I want this sort of tenderness for Nunu and for Marisol and another, in a more extended way for my own mother, that like I need to see myself as worthy of that as well. And that's been a really profound thing for me to kind of like sit with and grapple with. That's been one of the unexpected gifts of this journey.
Yeah, absolutely. It's overwhelming. It's exciting. It's all the emotions all at once.
Yeah.
So that's an incredible feat. Just kind of wrapping up everything here. You mentioned the website. Is there any other kind of social media links that we can follow in order to stay in touch with Through the Night?
Yes. So we are on our Twitter as Through the Night Doc, and on Instagram the same, and on Facebook it's just Through the Night, and it's a film page. So you can find us on the main ones.
Perfect. Great. Again, okay, so thank you so much for joining us today and taking the time to share more about your work. And we wish you all the best and hope to see you again over the course of the fest.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Great. And to our audiences, thanks for joining the Q&A for Through the Night. And please check out our Impact Expo on how you can help support working moms. Thank you again.
Thank you. Have a good night, everyone, and stay safe.
Yeah, stay safe. Bye.